Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Career-puccino. I hope the sun is shining where you are. It's a beautiful day here in South Cambridgeshire in the UK. Today's boost for postdocs comes from something that I know people really struggle with, which is interview questions. And so the focus of today is academic interview questions. I'm sure I can do some more general ones in a little bit. So hopefully you've got your cup of coffee ready. I certainly have. For a quick dive into the 5 key questions that I think really come up. Okay, so I've got a little presentation just to keep me on track because 20 minutes isn't long. Okay, so, that should be 5. So we're going to dive into 5 key academic questions. Now, there are obviously, they could ask you an infinite amount of questions. These are the ones that I know come up and the ones that I want to highlight as things that are important to do before the interview. So you need to think, right, okay, these questions I need to have answers for. I need to have thought them through. I need to have prepared. So these are the ones that I've highlighted for those reasons. So my first one is, how does this lectureship or fellowship, depending on what you're applying for, fit with your career aspirations? You might think that's quite a simple one. But quite often, this is one of the first questions you are asked. And it is really, really important to be clear and concise about where this job is going to take you. So a lot of people kind of, go back in time to answer this question. They said, well, I started my PhD and actually this is about the future, this question. So how does this position, academic position, fit with your career aspirations? So this position would be an ideal springboard for me to become an independent researcher, to have my own group, to work on my own projects, but also provides the scaffolding for a proper academic career. In 5 years' time, I'd hope to be senior lecturer, reader, whatever that promotion would be. So you've got to give an indication of the future, where you want to go. They want to employ ambitious academics. So if you just say, I'm not quite sure, then they're not going to be very convinced, are they? So it is important to say where you're aiming. So not just giving me the past history. You might need to do a bit of that. So, all my experience to date has given me the teaching, research and administration skills to be able to take on a lectureship. So you can praise your answer with that, but this is a real future looking, and you have to have thought, what are you going to be doing? And we'll come on. I've got another question which is quite good for that in a few minutes, but you have to have a clear idea of where you're going to go from here. Okay. The next question that does trip people up, we're very good at talking about our weaknesses, but what is your greatest achievement to date? And I've had all sorts of answers to this when I've been doing mock preparing interviews. So that is a service that I offer. And some people go, I don't think I've got one. Disastrous question. Answer. You've got to have something lined up. So this could be, it needs to be something aligned to the role that you're applying for. So if you, for instance, one of your greatest achievements might have been a brilliant teaching session, but there is no teaching in this role, it would be better to pick a research-based achievement. Likewise, if it's only teaching role, so a teaching only lectureship or something similar, then don't pick a research question, pick something teaching related. This question, they want you to prove that you can do the job. So they're giving you a chance to shine, but within the confines of that job. So if one of your greatest achievements is climbing a mountain, like this person here, it's not strictly relevant to the job. So you need to think, right, am I giving an answer that really portrays what the job is about? So great answers to this are perhaps to talk about the paper you're most proud of, a collaboration that you instigated and worked on. It might be a workshop or a conference that you developed and delivered, but it needs to be aligned to the role. So that's the important thing. So when you think of your achievements, and you will have lots in your preparation, thinking, right, which one of these most fits? An answer that I've heard quite often is about research supervision. So my first PhD student went on to not only finish her PhD, but then go on to research, a postdoc, and then a research position. So it might be something to do with research supervision, but you need to emphasize your role in that. So it's not just good enough to say, one of my PhD students graduated. Well, they might have done that with or without you. So what was your part in that story? So be careful not to talk about other people inadvertently in this question. It's what's your greatest achievement. So the part in that achievement was your excellent mentorship and research supervision. So make sure you focus on you and not other people. Also, because the majority of researchers that I work with work in teams, it can be quite hard to untangle. People tend to say, well, we did this and we did that. It's very natural, especially in the sciences. But you need to emphasize your role throughout. So just with the PhD student example, you emphasize your research supervision. If it was a collaboration, what did you do? Don't just leave it as an assumption. So I was responsible for coordinating a team of 7 international researchers. I coordinated it, I ran the meetings, I kept everyone on track, and therefore I was corresponding author on the resulting paper. I now know your picture, your place in that picture. So do make sure that you don't leave anything as an exercise for the reader. When you're being interviewed, you need to state, even if it's on your CV, even if it's on your application, you need to state it. This is your time in the sun when you're being interviewed. Okay, our next question, which is very much aligned perhaps to the future career. How does this fit in? But this is much more about what are you going to be doing in the next 10 years. So time frame might change. It might be 3 years. If it's a 3-year fellowship, it might be 5 years, 7.5, or 10. But the idea behind this question is to probe, have you got a plan? Now, 10 years is a long time to elucidate a plan. And ideally, you're wanting your answers to be 1 or 2 minutes long, not too long, because people will get lost in those answers. So thinking about 10 years, how are you going to break that up? So if it was a lectureship, let's focus on what they need to know. They need to know you have a research plan. They need to know you have a funding plan. So what grants are you going to fund? They need to know how big your research group is going to be. And perhaps they want to think about your career ambitions. So I would almost start with the end first. So in 10 years' time, I will be a reader with a group of 10, which includes 5 postdocs, 5 PhDs, whatever it might be. And we will be focusing on the research question. Put your research question in. How I'm going to get there, and then you unpack. So you've headlined the key achievements, and then you're going to unpack and you're going to say, To fund this, because most universities are very interested in the money, I will be applying to this, this, and this. That will build up my group. And then you can talk perhaps a little bit about the research direction as well. You want to keep it quite high level. No one wants to know exactly what you'll be doing for every second of those 10 years because you haven't got time. But I think headlining it with the key achievements and then saying how you're going to get there. So mentioning funding, specific funding. So not just I will apply for money, but I will apply to an ERC grant. I will apply to the Royal Society Fellowships, whatever it might be, so that you've got a clear track record or a trajectory rather through those 10 years. But it's a very, very common question. In an interview, you can take in notes if you want. Just make sure that if you're in a physical interview and you're not too nervous and shaking your notes. But on a digital Zoom type interview, you can always have your notes and your career trajectory and your plans behind the monitor on the wall, writ large, so that if you think, where am I going to be in 10 years' time? You can look just over your camera and it's there on the wall. So, kind of digital meetings, digital interviews are difficult, but they do have the advantage that you can have those notes behind your screen. But the 10 years, very, very common. But again, it comes back to the job description. Where would they expect a new lecturer, for instance, to be in 10 years' time? What's the typical career trajectory? Have a look, understand what is possible where you're applying. If you're applying to a research institute, that will be different to a university, and likewise, universities around the world vary in their career progression. So it also demonstrates an understanding of what you're getting into, so they know that you've done your research. Okay, we're going to hop on to think about teaching. Now, some positions are research only, so you wouldn't have the teaching question, and some positions are teaching only and you don't have the research questions. But I'm trying to cover everything in 20 minutes, as I do. So what has been your most challenging teaching experience? This is a great time to showcase something that really evidences the fact that you're a thoughtful teacher, that you have a teaching philosophy, that you think things through. So thinking about what is the most challenging, but in light of the job description. So you might have had a complete nightmare of a student, but actually it doesn't really help you answer this question. So thinking about your challenging teaching experience, what does that then evidence that you can do? So quite often recently, people have said, oh, well, teaching during the pandemic. I think interview panels are probably a bit bored of that answer now, but you still need to highlight what you did. So it's not enough to say we had to switch online. Yeah, so did everyone. What did you do specifically that made that successful? So here is where you can use the STAR framework, which stands for situation, task, actions, and results. So the situation you found yourself in, if we take the pandemic as an example, was that we had to move all our teaching online very, very quickly. That's the situation. The task, what were you given explicitly? So I was in charge of the MSc module on and providing enough provision online for students. You then think, okay, then what were your actions? So we've got the situation, the big sort of global situation. We've got your part in it, which is what they're interested in. What actions did you take? I assess what could be made online, but available for the learners pretty much all the time. So on the demand service. And then we top that up with live video lectures where people could ask questions or something like that. So what actions did you take? Thinking very, very specifically about software that you used, consultations that you did, how you knew you were on the right track. So another action might have come. So initially we found that students really struggle with interaction. So we put more quizzes in. So I used Mentimeter to try and make that online environment really interactive, and students really appreciated that. Okay, and then you come on to the R. So we've done the situation, S, task, T, A, actions. R are the results. And this is your happily ever after part of any interview question. So pick something positive. As a result, the student feedback was 9 out of 10 or whatever metric you have. Or you could give an anecdote. So one particular student said that this format worked much better for her for various reasons. So you can pick several bits of evidence. Those are your results. But it is important to have that happily ever after part to the question. So the STAR framework is your friend for this type of question. The last question, again, thinks about students, but the reason that I've put this in is that this really points to the type of preparation you should be doing for an academic, so say a lectureship post. So where do you think our students might struggle? You cannot answer this question unless you understand who you will be teaching. And this is why I've popped this in here, to make sure that you go and you do your homework. Where you have taught up till now will be in one university setting. If you're going to teach in a different university setting, chances are they will have a different cohort of students. It's understanding who you have in the room. So you might have some blisteringly bright, clever students who need challenge. Or you might have students who have come in from, in the UK, a foundation year, and therefore they might need some more support. They might not necessarily, if it was my own subject of physics, they might not have the mathematical ability because they've not been taught that. So we might need to offer supplementary mathematics for them. Whatever the students are, you need to understand who they are in order to be able to answer this question. How do we find out about that? Normally, when we're looking at jobs, we look at the researcher facing pages. You know, we look at research groups and we look at how we might fit in there. What you need to do is look at the undergraduate facing pages. What do they promise their undergraduates? Is there a focus on employability? Is there a focus on skills development? Is there a focus on becoming chartered, for instance, an engineering degree? Is there a focus on becoming a researcher? What are the aspirations that they're selling to prospective undergraduates? What grades do they need to have? And what subjects do they need to have to get on the course? That will give you a great idea as to the rough ability of the students. Also looking at where your students come from and the diversity of them will give you a really good heads up. So those figures are readily available on most university websites. So whether students are local, so they're drawn from local area, whether they have a huge proportion of international students, again, all those things will influence how you might go about teaching. And it shows that you've looked into the real situation that you would find yourself in as a lecturer or as an academic. So thinking about, rather than just pointing at the research pages, that you really do look at the teaching, the undergraduate pages as well. Likewise, if you're going to teach on a master's course, again, how do they attract their master's students? What do their master's students go on to do? Because that will inform your teaching. All those things are a bigger picture that you need to do in your preparation. So hopefully that has been useful. If there were new questions for you, then that's given you something extra to prepare. And hopefully I've just underlined the importance of preparation for an academic interview, and just thinking slightly more than beyond our research statement and our teaching statement. So thinking what else I can ask you. A great source of questions for interviews is jobs.ac.uk. They have a brilliant bank of interview questions, which I will pop in the notes on YouTube so that you can find those. They are really, really helpful. Okay, well, unless there are any burning questions, I'm going to finish my coffee and embrace the week. Hopefully you are looking forward to a really productive week. If you need help with applications or mock interviews, you know where to come. Just contact me through the links that you already have.